This is Pearl Harbor, which was once a U.S. military base and considered one of the most dangerous places in the world. But then something happened that completely destroyed it. The date was December 7th, 1941. A cold winter morning had just begun. That day became one of the most significant in history, as a devastating disaster was about to strike the U.S. Navy base. In this catastrophe, around 1,400 American military officers were going to lose their lives, and no one had any idea of the destruction that was about to unfold. All the officers were busy with their duties. Among them was one officer named Doris Miller, who was serving breakfast to the other officers. At exactly 7:57 a.m., he heard a siren. And this was the kind of siren no military officer would ever want to hear while on duty, because it clearly meant that death was very near. Doris immediately rushed to the top deck of the ship, and what he saw left him stunned. The entire sky was filled with Japanese bomber aircraft. Nearly 414 Japanese bombers were firing simultaneously at the U.S. Navy base. Before America could even respond to stop the attack, it was already too late. It seemed as if a great catastrophe had descended upon the U.S. Navy base. The Japanese aircraft were carefully targeting the ships docked at the harbor, one by one. This devastating assault had struck none other than the U.S. base at Pearl Harbor. And now the question remains, what was the real reason Japan found the courage to launch such a massive attack on a country like the United States? And what kind of surprise did the United States give Japan in return for this attack that forced Japan to surrender before America? This story begins in 1941, during World War II, when America put its full strength into helping save China. 3 years had already passed since the war had started. On one side were Germany and Italy, while on the other side were Britain, the Netherlands, and France. At this point, America had no role in the war. The U.S. remained completely silent because after the heavy losses of World War I, it wanted to keep itself away from the conflicts happening in Europe and Asia. But there was one country constantly provoking America, none other than its old ally, Japan. At that time, Japan had run out of natural resources, and because of that, it was rapidly occupying nearby countries to meet its domestic demands. By then, Japan had already taken control of Korea, Taiwan, and large parts of China. In the Pacific Ocean, its eyes were also set on the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. The problem, however, was that Malaysia was a British colony, Indonesia was a Dutch colony, and the Philippines was an American colony, though considered neutral. All these nations were fed up with Japan's aggression, especially since Hitler was secretly backing Japan. And Hitler had always been a sworn enemy of both America and Britain. Seeing Japan's moves, in July 1941, the United States cut off oil supplies to Japan. Japan didn't produce its own oil and used to import about 80% of it from the U.S. America told Japan that unless it withdrew from China, it would not get any oil. For Japan, this was a huge dilemma. On one side, if it withdrew from China, the entire world would think that despite supporting Hitler, it had bowed down before America. On the other side, without oil, Japan was rapidly becoming weak. So Japan made a bold decision. It would not leave China. Hitler also played a role in this decision. In fact, Hitler even encouraged Japan to attack Indonesia to fulfill its resource needs. But this plan wasn't as easy as it sounded, because Indonesia was a Dutch colony. To reach it, Japan would first have to capture the Philippines, which was under American control. Japan knew very well that if it attacked the Philippines, America would retaliate from its Pearl Harbor naval base in the Pacific. That could cause Japan massive losses. But with oil supplies quickly running out, Japan had no other option left. So, without thinking twice, they began preparing for a massive attack directly on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. The Japanese military decided to launch such a massive attack on Pearl Harbor that the United States would be completely shaken. Their plan was to destroy the naval base and secure the Philippines permanently. Japan secretly began preparing for this attack. They mobilized 15,000 military officers, including 2 battleships, 39 submarines, 30 destroyers, and, surprisingly, 414 bomber aircraft. All of these fighter planes were carried on 6 aircraft carriers, heading straight toward Pearl Harbor. On the other side, if we look at the defenses of Pearl Harbor, the U.S. had 8 battleships, 59 anti-aircraft weapons for submarines, and around 390 aircraft stationed there. America had enough force to counter Japan's attack, but the only way to stop it was to know about it beforehand. Since Japan wanted to keep the operation top secret, the military commander ordered that no communication should be made over wireless devices before the attack. The Japanese naval fleet covered 8,000 kilometers in just 5 days and reached about 370 kilometers from Pearl Harbor. From this point, the Japanese fighter planes were set to take off for the assault. This was about to become one of the most historic attacks of World War II. At this stage, America was not even officially part of the war, nor was it prepared. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, at exactly 7:57 a.m., 350 Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor in 2 separate waves. For the U.S. naval base, which had no idea of the incoming strike, it felt as if doomsday had arrived. The first wave of Japanese planes bombarded the base for 45 minutes and then suddenly retreated. It seemed like the danger had passed, but just 10 minutes later, the second wave returned and targeted the remaining ships, raining down bombs until they too were destroyed. The attack continued for 1 hour and 15 minutes, during which Japan completely dominated. America hadn't even managed a proper counterattack. There was simply no time to recover. In that short span, 20 vessels, 8 battleships, and over 300 aircraft were destroyed right where they stood. The entire scene turned into chaos, with flames covering the ground and black smoke engulfing the sky. Amid this destruction, aboard one U.S. battleship was an African-American cook named Doris Miller. You may recall from the earlier part of the story, he was the one who heard the emergency siren. As he rushed out, a Japanese missile struck his ship directly, injuring the captain and many other officers. Miller immediately carried the wounded to safety, and then, without any formal training, manned an anti-aircraft machine gun himself. Firing at the Japanese planes, he managed to shoot down about 6 aircraft on his own. This was the very first American counterattack in the Battle of Pearl Harbor, and it came from a cook who became an unexpected hero. In this attack, Japan lost a total of 29 aircraft. Doris Miller became the first African American to be awarded the Navy Cross, which at that time was the highest honor given by the U.S. Navy. After 1 hour and 15 minutes of bombing, the Japanese aircraft finally retreated, but by then, they had already pushed America directly into World War II. Perhaps Japan did not realize what America was about to do in response. Over the next 3 months, the U.S. rebuilt and restored its naval base. America's good fortune was that many of the ships sunk in shallow waters could still be repaired. Once recovered, the United States struck back at Japan with the same force that Japan had shown at Pearl Harbor. In April 1942, America launched its first major counterattack in World War II by bombing Japan's capital, Tokyo. But the U.S. didn't stop there. For the next 4 years, fierce battles raged between America and Japan, and this time, America clearly had the upper hand. Japan appeared weaker by the day, losing hundreds of soldiers regularly, yet it still refused to surrender. Finally, in August 1945, the United States carried out 2 devastating attacks that changed Japan forever. On the morning of August 6, 1945, at 8 a.m., an American B-29 Superfortress bomber appeared over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. On board was a 4,400 kilograms nuclear bomb nicknamed Little Boy. Just 45 seconds after being dropped, it detonated, obliterating everything in sight within moments. A massive fireball rose into the sky, heating the ground to nearly 5,000 degrees Celsius. Hiroshima was reduced to ashes. Before Japan could even recover from this catastrophe, on August 9th, 1945, America dropped another nuclear bomb on the city of Nagasaki. This bomb, called Fat Man, weighed 4,670 kilograms and destroyed everything within a 50-kilometer radius upon impact. These were the first nuclear bombs ever used on humans in history. It is estimated that more than 260,000 people died as a result of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A few hours after the second attack, Japan officially surrendered to the United States. It could no longer watch its nation being destroyed. With this, the war between America and Japan finally came to an end.